Welcome to NFL Daily, where every one of these Monday night doubleheaders gets a little crazy. That's right, I'm here in my garage. Nick Shook is in Ohio, and his fingers are tired after writing up these games. Ravens, Bucs, a lot going on in that game. Early, late, a lot of points, and then the Chargers and the Cardinals have a tastefully quick game, but a weird ending and a lot to talk about there. Welcome, Shook. Long day for you.
Yeah, Greg, this is how I know you're a writer at heart, because I didn't even mention that to you, but that's the first thought I had as I was preparing to jump on this show was, wow, my hands are tired after writing all that up. So thank you for noticing that. I appreciate that.
Yes, Shook's a big guy, but I can tell when he's playing hurt. Let's not mess around. Let's start with the main event. That was down in Tampa. We'll get to the undercard, Chargers and Cardinals, a little later.
On 2nd and 17, Lamar to throw. Going deep, near side. He's got Bateman open at the 5. Touchdown! Rashad Bateman! And the Ravens strike again! 49 yards from Lamar Jackson.
That was Jerry Sandusky and Rod Woodson on WBAL. I missed the great celebration by Bateman the first time. I was too busy celebrating that touchdown for my son, who started Bateman in fantasy. The Ravens get it done, 41-31. What a wild game. Lamar Jackson throws 5 touchdowns, matching his 5 incompletions. Oh, by the way, he ran for 52 yards. More on that in a second, but that was just a beautiful throw on a night full of them, full of good decisions, full of open receivers, full of Lamar and his offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, just reading those Todd Bowles blitzes before they even got to him. What a performance there by the Ravens offense, Nick, after they fell down 10-0 early.
Yeah, all that was missing from that call was the hay is in the barn. It was because it was too early. But I'll tell you what, when I saw that touchdown pass, I said, good night, Buccaneers, because the Ravens were not about to be stopped on Monday night. Year 2 of the Todd Monken offense is in full force in a game like this. Consider their first possession in that game. They had to punt. They got blitzed twice. They didn't have an answer for it. After that, the Ravens went touchdown, field goal, touchdown. They scored 34 unanswered points. They were an absolute machine, and most of that didn't even involve Derrick Henry. It was the Lamar Jackson show. They were making it work in the passing game. He was taking off running. They could not be stopped. And folks, if you had any questions about the Ravens, I know we can sound hyperbolic when it comes to this team because they can be so impressive on nights like this. But I'm telling you right now, you have a leader for MVP, and his name is Lamar Jackson.
Oh, yeah. There's no question. He's gone to another level. It's crazy because he's won 2 MVPs, but the way that he won his first MVP was so unique and was incredible to watch. Nothing quite like it in NFL history. And yet, even when it was happening, you knew you can't probably live like this your whole career. And it was why Gregg Roman, who it was not lost on me, is part of this night's adventures too, while coaching up the Chargers and their kind of stillborn offense in Arizona. And meanwhile, Lamar Jackson is in a much better offense for him. So that was the first MVP. Then last year, playing outstanding on the best team in the league. And it just was a year where, let's be real, there wasn't perfect MVP candidates, and he was the best one because he was probably the best quarterback in the league in a year where there just wasn't anyone standing out, and they were the best team. But right now, I think mentally, physically, he's certainly running the ball better, and I think he's making better decisions, and there just aren't as many inaccurate throws from Lamar Jackson. And when he plays a defense that has some holes in it, like this Tampa Bay Buccaneers secondary does when they blitz and they don't get home, I mean, he just trashes them. It's kind of amazing to think the old book against Lamar Jackson was, oh, well, he can't really handle the blitz. Go cover 0 against Lamar Jackson. He went 11 for 15 for 166 yards and 3 touchdowns against the blitz. He is second in the NFL this season in success rate against the blitz, behind only Patrick Mahomes, who's also pretty good and probably will be heard from in this MVP race.
Yeah, in my notes about Lamar last week, it was, he's really taken his passing game to the next level. He's become a very accurate passer. That was the knock. Oh, he can't throw the football. Well, he can throw the football. And last year, you compare MVP seasons, if this is going to be an MVP season for him as well, it was about the Zay Flowers show when it came to the passing game because they lost Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers really stepped in. Well, tonight, Zay gets one catch for 11 yards and then disappears because he gets a little banged up, and it becomes the Rashad Bateman show. 4 catches for 121 yards. Mark Andrews gets 4 catches for 41 yards and 2 touchdowns. Him and Bateman combined for 3 touchdowns overall. It doesn't matter who's running routes or who's open. Lamar's going to get it to him on target, and that's not even accounting for his running game, and that's why they've taken this entire offense, and Lamar has elevated himself to a whole new level, and what makes them so scary to play against because you can't just blitz them anymore. There is no simple blueprint to stop this offense.
I mean, they are just an absolute wagon. We're going to get to the really heartbreaking ending to this game, which included Chris Godwin's injury in a minute. But I kind of want to set up what led to that point because you mentioned, the game fell over after that Bateman touchdown. But after that was Derrick Henry's crazy long run down the field, which I just assumed was going to be a touchdown because you didn't see a defender. I think it was Zion McCollum on the screen the whole time. He flies in because he had the angle. But yes, it was an 81-yard run. Let's actually listen to that one.
Derrick Henry is the deep back in the offset eye. Ricard in front of him. Lamar under center. Give us to Henry, left side, breaks through the line, cross the 15,
he's
20,
gone.
leg race down the sideline, 40, midfield, the train is rolling, he's to the 30, 20, 15, and he's taken off his feet at the 10. Derrick Henry flips the field with 1 run.
Yes, 81 yards, and Rod Woodson, I don't blame him. I assumed that Derrick Henry was gone too, and let's fly up that tweet that you had, Eric Roberts, if you're watching on YouTube. And really, check us out on YouTube. Subscribe. We really appreciate that. We've been growing the audience there, and we obviously love the audio audience the most. You guys are our people, but it's cool either way. And you can see how Derrick Henry reached a top speed of 21.72 miles per hour. That was the 3rd fastest of his entire career and the 5th fastest by a ball carrier this season. Yeah, McCollum was even faster. Often called the most athletic guy on that Bucs team, which is saying something. So that's the type of effort it would take to catch up with him. But that set up Mark Andrews' 2nd touchdown, which, by the way, was part of him becoming the all-time receiving touchdowns leader in Ravens history. So much was happening in this game. That was just like an afterthought they mentioned as a little lower third. That's pretty cool. He passed Todd Heap as the leader in Ravens history. And, yeah, at that point, it's 34-10. Right after that, actually, Shook, was Lamar Jackson kind of losing his mind and throwing a backwards pass with just an inaccurate pass that turns out to be a fumble that we thought was returned by McCollum, but eventually was just ruled a fumble and that he was down, and the Buccaneers get a touchdown. And then they score another touchdown. So when you were going through all your touchdown, field goal, you had to stop because there was that fumble in the mix. But then there was another touchdown drive, which was led by even more Derrick Henry. This 1-2 punch, it's just crazy. It's just like I've never seen anything quite like it. Like, it's just awesome as a football fan. It's like, you're watching a moment in time, kind of like that first Lamar Jackson MVP season. This can't go forever, these two at this level, but right now it's just ridiculous, and there is every reason to believe it can continue all season.
Yeah, and what's scary about that is Derrick Henry was having a quiet night. At one point, a graphic flashed on the screen that showed he had 5 carries for, I think, like 22 yards or something like that, and they were still putting up points. He ends with 15 carries for 169. This can jump up and get you at any point in the game. It can be the closer, the knockout punch, even when you least expect it. That's how dangerous this duo is.
Yeah, and that second touchdown that he scored, Derrick Henry, not that he set up, rather, that made it 41-14. I actually think that's an important moment in the game because that was the moment that it was over. It was 41-18. The only reason the Bucs had even gotten those 8 points there after 34 straight by the Ravens was Lamar set them up on a short field. There's under 9 minutes to go. And I thought at that point, Todd Bowles might just pull his starters. Because, that's a 23-point lead with 9 minutes to go. It was a very physical night. There were a lot of injuries. Mike Evans had already left this game with a hamstring injury. He actually dropped a potential touchdown pass after he got his 100th career touchdown to start the scoring.
Also a footnote.
Right. Like his 100th career receiving touchdown. It's a little confusing because he had his 100th total touchdown a couple of weeks ago on a primetime game, but this was his 100th receiving. Second drive, the Bucs are trying to go up 14-0 after a couple of good defensive series, and he drops a pass and he hurts his hamstring. He came into the game with the injury. You could tell he was limping around even on the sideline. Some questions, maybe should they have let him keep playing in that game, but a lot of injuries. Tyke Smith had a concussion. Marlon Humphrey had a knee injury, and just people were hitting. It's hot there. I just was like, maybe they're going to pull their guys. They don't pull their guys. Baker Mayfield starts that next drive, and we'll get to Mayfield's night, by throwing a ball right at one of the Ravens defenders. I think it was Ardarius Washington. It goes right through Ardarius Washington's hand, and Cade Otton catches it on his shoulder somehow. It was a truly remarkable catch, and they end up scoring a touchdown on that drive. Like I said, it was 41-18. I thought they'd just pull their starters. Okay, they score there. Maybe you pull it then. No, let's go for an onside kick. They get the onside kick. It's perfectly executed. And I bring all that up, Nick, because they scored another touchdown, and it all led to this sequence where it's 41-31 with a minute to go, and it's over. They have the whole field to go, and Chris Godwin dislocates his ankle, and it was like a sickening moment, and they didn't show the replay because it looked so bad. But if you rewound your television, which I did, enough to just see like it was a dislocated ankle, the team announced after the game. That tells you all you need to know. I just started going through all the moments that led to that point, that Todd Bowles should not have had his starters out there necessarily, but also just all the bad luck that it took for them to even be playing in that moment. And it sucks, man, because Chris Godwin's one of my favorite players. He's a lot of people's favorite players on that Bucs team, certainly. And it looked like a season-ending injury for a guy who was really having a career season.
Yeah, a guy who caught a 55-yard pass for a touchdown last week, primarily because he caught it and ran 55 yards for a touchdown. Like, he's a game-breaking player, and him and Evans together make for one of the best, 1-2 punches at receiver in the NFL. Once they lost Evans, that offense, entered a rut because, as we've learned tonight, if you didn't already know, Baker Mayfield relies heavily on Mike Evans. So then he's going to rely on Chris Godwin, who's going to attract all the defensive attention. But all of this comes back to the point that in a rare moment, getting the onside kick actually worked out poorly for the team that got the onside kick because it gave them the hope or the opportunity to keep pushing forward and leaving those guys on the field when, with the benefit of hindsight, we know that they shouldn't have been out there. We didn't know he was going to get hurt, but you don't get that onside kick, they're not out there, and it doesn't matter. But because they got it, they kept pushing forward and trying to win a game that they obviously weren't going to win, and now the worst possible result has come from it.
Right. Let's listen to Todd Bowles answering a lot of pointed questions after the game about Godwin's injury.
He's a player. We're trying to win the ball game. I mean, we were still down 10. We were trying to get extra points and kick another onside kick. It just happened. With Mike going down, we didn't have that many receivers left as it was, so we play what we got.
Bowles kept going around in circles on that, and I understand what he was saying. I think there are shades of gray here. Ryan Clark was on after the game on SVP on ESPN explaining that this is how football works. You play to the end. You're trying to win. You were down 34-10. You don't want to sound like you're giving up on your players. They want to be out there. They want to win. I do think you can protect your players. Like I said, I was thinking about it with 6.5 minutes left. This drives me crazy each and every week that these teams who do all these things in the preseason and during the regular season to prevent injuries then just have players out there in hopeless situations late. When he got hurt, there was 1 minute to go. They were down 2 scores. I think they were out of timeouts. They might have had one. And they had 90 yards to go. Like there's no chance to win that game in that point. John Harbaugh had already put in Josh Johnson. I think it's worth mentioning. He had kind of raised the white flag saying, hey, you just want to end this thing? Because they got the ball around midfield after another failed onside kick, and they were up 10. The Bucs had their timeouts. They decided to use them, but Josh Johnson came in to just hand the ball off because John Harbaugh wasn't messing around. I disagree with Todd Bowles. I think you get the ball in that situation, 1:30 left. you don't have a chance to win, especially after the first couple plays. And it takes a lot, and it's bad luck, certainly, and it's football players getting hurt playing football. But I think he could have called off the Dogs a couple series before.
Yeah, and again, we're operating with the benefit of hindsight now, but to use a cross-sport comparison, I think it was the late Ayrton Senna who once said, as soon as you see a gap as a racer and you don't go for it, you're no longer a racer. And that just speaks to the competitor in everybody, and especially in football, which you need to be the ultimate competitor to not only win, but survive. It's just that you got the worst possible outcome from this, and one that could absolutely, derail your season, especially after you lost Mike Evans to a hamstring injury. And it's going to hurt for them. Like, it's going to hurt for them beyond the fact that they saw what happened on the field and they all realized in that moment, oh man, why do we even risk this? It's going to hurt for them long term. And it is unfortunate, but again, it still is football.
Yeah. I'm such a fan of Godwin since he first came into the league when he was playing with Jameis. He's the type of receiver I like. We were talking before the show. You mentioned Anquan Bolden. We were like, who has the Ravens receiving touchdown record? No, he wasn't there long enough. And Godwin almost reminded me of like a smaller Anquan Bolden, but so tough in the way that he plays, and injuries affect players differently. And he took so long to really become the player that he was after I believe it was a torn ACL, right? That he was coming back from a couple years ago. And you thought, oh, you're never going to see that Chris Godwin again. That's too bad. And then here he was coming into this week, leading the NFL in receptions, leading the NFL in yak, third in receiving yards. He wasn't, it's weird to call him the one and Mike Evans the two because of the roles that they play.
Yeah.
But in terms of production, like, he was the number one receiver on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's also in a contract year, and just all that combined, I think that's part of the anger that people had about Todd Bowles, and maybe some of that, even from me, I tweeted something is a little unfair. I think the overall point about garbage time playing is something that, like, teams, I think, will get better at over time. They really haven't, but I do think that's something that, like, is dumb that so many teams do. But it's also just disappointing. It's also disappointing for this Bucs team who plays the Falcons next week, almost certainly going to be without Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. You would think Evans is going to be a week-to-week type of injury. They have Trey Palmer. They have Jalen McMillan was back for this game. They have Sterling Shepard. That's their wide receiver crew. So good luck.
Yeah, that takes a lot of the punch out of this offense, which was liable to blow up at any time for a huge number of points. Just ask the Saints how that went last week, because they learned very quickly that this offense can put up a ton of points. And now you take that out of there. We knew their running game, which has been up and down, has gotten better in recent weeks, but was a big point of emphasis going into the season. That's why they invested in Bucky Irving. Sean Tucker had a breakout game last week. Like, the balance was coming, but the threat was always the passing game. Started with Baker Mayfield, but it really relied on those two guys. You take those two guys out of the equation, suddenly that ceiling is so much lower. And suddenly the NFC South race gets very interesting, because the Buccaneers no longer look like the best team in the division if they can't put up points at that rate without these guys.
That's why gambling's crazy. We're not allowed to gamble.
Yeah.
As NFL employees, and that's saved us a lot of heartache and
I don't know how people do it.
tension
really
over the
don't.
years. But I am thinking about, like, their over. I picked them to win the division. I like this Bucs team.
Yeah.
And I really like their over/under too. And, like, when this game started, I think it was a very typical Bucs game for this season. Like, when they look good, they look good. They came out, and Baker's 11 for 13 to starting the game, and they ran the ball well all night. Like, if they could have kept the lead, they could have run the ball, I think, more consistently, but they just got in a game script where they had to stop. But for the most part, they've kind of figured out their running game. The defense is another matter, and they have injuries there, and they're playing the Ravens, and they probably always were going to lose this game. But this is a team that I think could win the division because they're pretty balanced, but mostly because they're a good offense. And I think Liam Cohen has done a really nice job this year overall, accentuating Baker's strengths and getting a lot out of the weapons that they have. And they do have weapons. You saw Cade Otton went for 100 yards tonight. And now, like, maybe Evans gets back 100% in a couple weeks, and they'll still be fighting. It's not like their season is over. But if Evans and Godwin are out, if Godwin's out for the season and Evans is out for 3 weeks, it's like that might be enough. That capsizes your season. Forget your over-unders, forget your division, forget your team. That's more important.
Yeah, it's going to be a real test of Baker Mayfield as a quarterback, too, because we know he had that great season last year. He got paid for it and everything else. Everything's turning up for him, right? But you take away his top 2 targets, it's going to get harder for any quarterback. Just ask Matthew Stafford how it's been with the Rams. But this is going to be a real test of how he can make do with it, because as soon as Evans left the field and they were in that goal-to-go situation, he threw that interception in the end zone. I realized for the first time Baker doesn't know what to do when all else fails. Before, it was throw it up to Mike Evans. Well, now he doesn't have that guy out there.
Throw the ball away, bro.
he threw it right to Marlon Humphrey.
I'm glad we got to this point, because Patrick Claybon's MVP candidate, Baker Mayfield, was bad in this game.
Bad.
He was straight up bad. And it's funny because he had a monster fantasy night in the end because of those fourth quarter touchdowns. He ends up with 3 touchdowns and 370 yards along with 2 interceptions. But after that fast start, and it's almost emblematic of Baker's career, he was like kind of collapsing in on himself for a couple quarters. Like, he was sacking himself. The 2 interceptions were just total panic plays where he didn't know what to do on that end zone interception. And then the second one, it was such a bad interception that Marlon Humphrey got hurt on it because 2 Ravens were fighting over the ball because they both were going to get it. And he could have been intercepted a couple more times. And he hit a play early where he improvised and he made something happen while just running around. I was like, oh, that's almost dangerous when he hits one of those early. Because then he just started doing it and he was kind of running in circles, and it was the bad Baker. And you see these pop up, and he's mostly kept this down in Tampa, but you see it pop up for a couple quarters at a time. And it was kind of a rough watch there for a couple quarters. And it makes me a little worried about what's going to happen without these receivers.
And I'm telling you, a lot of that has to do with the fact that Evans isn't on the field, because the first half of last season, it was chuck and pray. And usually it worked out for them, and it got them on track. When nothing else is working, that would work for them. The game script and the situation also affected them. The fact that they had to suddenly dig out of this deficit, they couldn't lean on the running game, and he takes away his best receiver. Where is he going to go now? And that's just what I fear could be the outcome for them in the next couple of weeks.
He was creating it, though. He was holding the ball. It was driving me a little crazy.
It's that weakness, and it's him getting beat by underneath zone. Like cover 1 robber has always been his Achilles heel for his entire career. It's those 2 things that have held him back.
Right. So I mentioned the 2 interceptions. Yeah, there could have been 2 more, and they were both on basically what you're talking about, him not seeing the underneath defender. I know we've gone a long time on this game, but I found it very interesting. Just a couple more points I want to get to before we leave it. I mentioned Marlon Humphrey. He had that knee injury. That's important for the Ravens, who, their defense is a little up and down, but certainly finished off this game well. I think the defensive line is really good.
Yeah, they had a nice bounce back, because early in this game it looked like, oh man, here they go. They struggle to communicate. They're caught out of alignment on the touchdown pass to Mike Evans. Buccaneers are going up tempo. They're catching them by surprise, but they were able to bounce back. Probably for the first time this entire season, I saw this Ravens defense legitimately pick themselves up off the mat and turn into a performance that makes me think, oh, the potential is there. They're lacking some pieces. Some guys have gotten hurt. Zach Orr's a first-year defensive coordinator. But for the first time this season, I was like, oh, this Ravens defense can actually get the job done, because those stops they got in the middle of this game were a big part of why the Ravens could put up so many points. The Buccaneers offense wasn't on the field, plain and simple.
I think their front is good. I mean, they stopped the run, and Matabike and Adafeoye stepped up. Kyle Van Noy's doing his thing. There's obviously Roquan there. I think they're a little deeper up front than people expected, and they're good up front on both lines. Like, their offensive line is really improved. Like, we're talking about Derrick Henry getting these big lanes to run through. It's cohesive when they have the option plays and Lamar chooses to run. It's just like the easiest 8 yards. And that's been true his whole career, but that does take some cohesion that wasn't there the first couple weeks of the season. And then Ronnie Stanley, I wanted to point out, didn't give up a pressure in this entire game despite all those blitzes. That's amazing. 0 pressures. He has given up 0 sacks all season. Next Gen Stats says he's the only guy with 50 pass sets to do that. And he's like a couple hundred or whatever at this point. So he's playing out of his mind. I believe he's in a contract year too. Yeah. So some guys are getting paid there. This is the best team in football right now. I don't think there's any question. I know that Chiefs fans would disagree. But I just think right now, neutral field, who are you taking? It doesn't make a difference. Ravens fans know that. Like that crown is meaningless, but right now they're the best team in football.
Yeah, at least visually speaking, the Chiefs' offense is slow and methodical, and the Ravens can put up points in bunches. Yeah, absolutely. But it's really going to come down to the trenches.
Being able to do it all. Lamar is doing it all. He's got the coach to match. And yeah, that was a fun night. Even though it was one-sided by the end, it was a lot of fun, at least until that late injury. So prayers for Chris Godwin. We'll be thinking of him. We're also thinking of the Cardinals and the Chargers. We haven't even gotten to the other game tonight. We'll do that after the break.